As the 1971 Convention also addresses preparations of scheduled substances, preparations of dronabinol might thus be subject to the control regimes of both the 1961 and 1971 conventions. I now would like to move to the adoption of the draft decision. I recall that Rule 55 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of the Economic and Social Council provides that when a proposal has been adopted or rejected, it may not be reconsidered at the same session unless the Commission so decides. Hence, following Rule 55, the Commission would need to vote a second time if it wishes to reconsider a recommendation, but the members of the Commission seem in the situation described in operative para 3 of the procedural decision, pursuant to the text contained in operative para 3 of that procedural decision, to wish to deviate from Rule 55 and not vote a second time, and this is the Commission's prerogative to decide. Hence, notwithstanding Rule 55, may I take it that the Commission, before it proceeds to vote on the WHO scheduling recommendations, wishes to adopt the draft procedural decision including the following provision. In case recommendation 5.2.1 is approved and recommendation 5.2.2 is rejected by the Commission, recommendation 5.2.1 will be deemed reconsidered and rejected, and there will be no vote on recommendation 5.3.1 and 5.3.2. In case recommendation 5.3.1 is approved and recommendation 5.3.2 is rejected by the Commission, recommendation 5.3.1 will be deemed reconsidered and rejected, and this is in accordance with the understanding reached under silence procedure. If I see no objection, it is so decided. Drawing of lots for voting. In the procedural decision that the Commission just adopted, a roll call vote is requested for all scheduling votes. In line with Rule 59 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of ECOSOC, I would therefore now kindly ask the Secretariat to prepare the drawing of lots. As advised by the ECOSOC Secretariat, I will draw once and the Commission will then maintain the order for all votes. So we proceed. I will ask the Secretariat for proceeding with drawing of lots. It seems that we are going to follow kind of English alphabetical order because the name I have taken out is Algeria. So we will start all roll call votes with Algeria and then proceed in the English alphabetical order. So Secretariat, I will ask the Secretariat to proceed forward. We go to recommendation consideration of recommendation 5.1. We will now start with the voting. As agreed in the procedural decision, I will open the floor for explanations of the vote after the finalization of all votes. First, I would like to invite the Commission to take action on the WHO recommendation to delete cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Convention. This recommendation has also been referred to as Recommendation 5.1. I would like to invite Mr. Giles Fort of WHO to present the recommendation. Mr. Fort, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, WHO is pleased to present the recommendations of the 41st Expert Committee on Drug Dependence meeting on cannabis and cannabis-related substances. So I will start with the recommendation 5.1, cannabis and cannabis resin. And I would like to say that in the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, cannabis and cannabis resin are described respectively as the flowering or fruiting tops of the cannabis plant and as the separated resin obtained from the cannabis plant. The committee noted that adverse effects of cannabis have been well documented. The immediate effects of consumption include impairment of movement and cognitive functions, while long-term cannabis use is associated with increased risk of mental health disorders, such as anxiety, depression, and psychotic illness. Cannabis can cause physical dependence in people who use the drug daily or near daily. The withdrawal symptoms that occur upon abstinence include gastrointestinal disturbance, irritability, restlessness, and sleep impairment. The committee also noted that there are medical uses for cannabis, particularly for cannabis preparations that are orally administered. A number of countries have registered and authorized the use of cannabis preparations for the treatment of medical conditions such as chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, pain, sleep disorders, certain forms of epilepsy and spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis. Cannabis and cannabis resin are scheduled in Schedule 1 and Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Substances that are included in both these schedules are particularly liable to abuse and to produce ill effects and have little or no therapeutic use. The evidence presented to the committee did not indicate that cannabis and cannabis resin were particularly liable to produce ill effects similar to the effect of the other substances in Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, and such as fentanyl analogs, heroin, and other opioids. In addition, preparations of cannabis have shown therapeutic potential that has been recognized in a number of countries. The committee therefore concluded that the inclusion of cannabis and cannabis resin in Schedule 4 is not consistent with the criteria for a drug to be placed in Schedule 4. However, in considering the level of risk to health of cannabis, and particularly very high THC forms of cannabis that are smoked, the committee recommended that cannabis and cannabis resin continue to be included in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Accordingly, in Recommendation 5.1, the committee recommended that cannabis and cannabis resin be deleted from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Mr. Giles Ford for his explanation, his introduction of this recommendation 5.1. Is the Commission now ready to move to a vote on recommendation 5.1? And if so, I now invite the Commission to take a vote on the recommendation made by WHO to delete cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Convention. Let me remind the Commission that under the 1961 Convention, in accordance with Rule 58 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of ECOSOC, a simple majority of the Commission members present and voting is required. I now would like to ask the Secretariat to call upon the Commission members in English alphabetical order, starting with the delegation of Algeria. Each Commission member will be called. Please indicate your decision on the recommendation to delete cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Convention by replying yes, no, or abstention. The vote of each member will be inserted in the record. Joe, please proceed with the roll call vote.
Algeria,
No.
Algeria, no. Angola,
No.
Angola, no. Australia,
Yes.
Australia, yes. Austria,
Yes.
Austria, yes. Bahrain,
No.
Bahrain, no. Belgium,
Yes.
Belgium, yes. Brazil,
Brazil, no.
Brazil, no. Burkina Faso,
Burkina Faso, no.
No.
Burkina Faso, no. Canada,
Yes.
Canada, yes. Chile,
No.
Chile, no. China,
China, no.
China, no. Colombia,
Yes.
Colombia, yes. Côte d'Ivoire,
No.
Côte d'Ivoire, no. Croatia,
Yes.
Croatia, yes. Cuba,
No.
Cuba, no. Czech Republic,
Yes.
Czech Republic, yes. Ecuador,
Yes.
Ecuador, yes. Egypt,
Egypt, no.
Egypt, no. El Salvador,
Yes.
El Salvador, yes. France,
Oui.
Yes.
France, yes. Germany,
Yes.
Germany, yes. Hungary,
Hungary votes no.
Hungary, no. India,
Yes.
India, yes. Iraq,
No.
Iraq, no. Italy,
Yes.
Italy, yes. Jamaica,
Yes.
Jamaica, yes. Japan,
Japan, no.
Japan, no. Kazakhstan,
Kazakhstan, no.
Kazakhstan, no. Kenya,
Kenya, no.
Kenya, no. Kyrgyzstan,
Kyrgyzstan, no.
Kyrgyzstan, no. Libya,
Libya, no.
Libya, no. Mexico,
Yes.
Mexico, yes. Morocco,
Yes.
Morocco, yes. Nepal,
Yes.
Nepal, yes. Netherlands,
Yes.
Netherlands, yes. Nigeria,
Nigeria, no.
Nigeria, no. Pakistan,
Pakistan, no.
Pakistan, no. Peru,
Peru, no.
Peru, no. Poland,
Yes.
Poland, yes. Russian Federation,
Russia, no.
Russian Federation, no. South Africa,
Yes.
South Africa, yes. Spain,
Spain, yes.
Spain, yes. Sweden,
Yes.
Sweden, yes. Switzerland,
Switzerland, yes.
Switzerland, yes. Thailand,
Yes.
Thailand, yes. Togo,
Togo, no.
Togo, no. Turkey,
Turkey, no.
Turkey, no. Turkmenistan,
Turkmenistan, no.
Turkmenistan, no. Ukraine,
Abstention.
Ukraine, abstention. United Kingdom,
Yes.
United Kingdom, yes. United States,
Yes.
United States, yes. And Uruguay,
Yes.
Uruguay, yes. Thank you. Afghanistan,
No.
Afghanistan, no. Thank you.
Just give us a minute so that we can share the result with you. Honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me read the result to you. There is a total of 27 votes in favor of the recommendation, 25 votes against, with one abstention. So the recommendation is accepted. I declare the Commission has decided to delete cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Convention. We now move forward to recommendation 5.2.1, and please keep under consideration the scenarios which Secretariat has shared, which we have been discussing and which we have finalized in the informal consultations. Now, I would like to invite the Commission to take action on WHO recommendation to add dronabinol and its stereoisomers, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. This recommendation has also been referred to as Recommendation 5.2.1. I would like to invite Mr. Giles Fort of WHO to present the recommendation. Mr. Fort, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The main psychoactive substance in the cannabis plant is one of the four isomers of delta 9 THC. This substance is used medically and is sometimes known by its international non-proprietary INN name, dronabinol. Delta 9 THC today also refers to the principal compound in illicit cannabis-derived psychoactive products. It is currently placed in Schedule 2 of the 1971 Convention on Psychotropic Substances. The liability to abuse of delta 9 THC is almost identical to that of cannabis, and the adverse effects of delta 9 THC are also almost identical to those of cannabis. The committee noted that the risk of abuse and ill effect were particularly pronounced for those smoked cannabis-derived psychoactive products, such as butane ash oil, that contain very high delta 9 THC concentrations. a substance liable to similar abuse and productive of similar ill effects as that of a substance already scheduled within the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs would, in accordance with the conventions, be scheduled in the same way as that substance. As Delta-9 THC is liable to similar abuse as cannabis and has similar ill effects, it meets the criteria for inclusion in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Accordingly, in Recommendation 5.2.1, the committee recommended that dronabinol and its stereoisomers, Delta-9 THC, be added to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Mr. Ford for your introduction of the recommendation. Is the Commission ready to move to a vote on recommendation 5.2.1? Therefore, I now invite the Commission to take a vote on the recommendation to add dronabinol and its stereoisomers, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. Let me remind the Commission that under the 1961 Convention, in accordance with Rule 58 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of ECOSOC, a simple majority of the Commission members present and voting is required. I now would like to ask the Secretariat to call upon the Commission members in accordance with the same order for which we had drawn a lot for the first recommendation. Please indicate your vote by answering yes, no, or abstention. Secretary Joe, can I request you to proceed with the roll call vote on this recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Algeria.
No.
Algeria, no. Angola.
No.
Angola, no. Australia.
Yes.
Australia, yes. Austria.
Yes.
Austria, yes. Bahrain.
No.
Bahrain, no. Belgium.
Yes.
Belgium, yes. Brazil.
Brazil, no.
Brazil, no. Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso, no.
Burkina Faso, no. Canada.
No.
Canada, no. Chile.
No.
Chile, no. China.
No.
China, no. Colombia.
Colombia, yes.
Colombia, yes. Côte d'Ivoire.
No.
Côte d'Ivoire, no. Croatia.
Yes.
Croatia, yes. Cuba.
Cuba, no.
Cuba, no. Czech Republic.
Yes.
Czech Republic, yes. Ecuador.
Yes.
Ecuador, yes. Egypt.
No.
Egypt, no. El Salvador.
No.
El Salvador, no. France.
Oui.
France, yes. Germany.
Yes.
Germany, yes. Hungary.
Yes.
Hungary, yes. India.
No.
India, no. Iraq.
Iraq, no.
Iraq, no. Italy.
Yes.
Italy, yes. Jamaica.
Yes.
Jamaica, yes. Japan.
No.
Japan, no. Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan, no.
Kazakhstan, no. Kenya.
No.
Kenya, no. Kyrgyzstan.
No.
Kyrgyzstan, no. Libya.
No.
Libya, no. Mexico.
No.
Mexico, no. Morocco.
Yes.
Morocco, yes. Nepal.
Abstention.
abstention. Nepal, abstention. Netherlands,
Yes.
Netherlands, yes. Nigeria,
Nigeria, no.
Nigeria, no. Pakistan,
Pakistan, no.
Pakistan, no. Peru,
Yes.
Peru, yes. Poland,
Yes.
Poland, yes. Russian Federation,
Russia, no.
Russian Federation, no. South Africa,
South Africa, yes.
South Africa, yes. Spain,
Spain, yes.
Spain, yes. Sweden,
Yes.
Sweden, yes. Switzerland,
Yes.
Switzerland, yes. Thailand,
Yes.
Thailand, yes. Togo,
Togo, no.
Togo, no. Turkey,
Turkey, no.
Turkey, no. Turkmenistan,
Turkmenistan, no.
Turkmenistan, no. Ukraine,
Abstention.
Yes.
United Kingdom, United Kingdom, yes. United States,
No.
United States, no. Uruguay,
No.
Uruguay, no. And Afghanistan,
Yes.
Afghanistan, yes. Thank you.
Seek your indulgence for a few moments while we share the result with you. Honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me share the result of this vote on this recommendation with you. There is a total of 23 votes in favor, 28 votes against, and 2 abstentions. Thus, the recommendation is rejected. I declare the Commission has decided not to add dronabinol and its stereoisomer delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. And we move forward as recommendation 5.21 has been rejected. We will be following the scenario 2. We will not thus vote on recommendations 5.2.2, 5.3.1 and 5.3.2. In the following, I will explain why we do not vote on each of these recommendations. Recommendation 5.2.2. WHO has submitted a recommendation referred to as recommendation 5.2.2 to delete dronabinol and its stereoisomers from Schedule 2 of the 1961 Convention, subject to the CND's adoption of the recommendation to add dronabinol and its stereoisomers delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. The condition contained in the WHO recommendation that the CND must have first accepted the addition of dronabinol and its stereoisomers delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention was not fulfilled as the CND has rejected recommendation 5.2.1. Therefore, the Commission is not to consider and will not vote on recommendation 5.2.2. Further, on recommendation 5.3.1, WHO has submitted a recommendation referred to as recommendation 5.3.1 to add tetrahydrocannabinol, isomers of delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention, subject to the CND's adoption of the recommendation to add dronabinol and its stereoisomers delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. The condition contained in the WHO recommendation that the CND must have first accepted the addition of dronabinol and its stereoisomers delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention was not fulfilled as the CND has rejected recommendation 5.2.1. Therefore, the Commission is not to consider and will not vote on recommendation 5.3.1. And regarding recommendation 5.3.2, WHO has submitted this recommendation to delete tetrahydrocannabinol isomers of delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol from Schedule 1 of the 1971 Convention, subject to the CND's adoption of the recommendation to add tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. The condition contained in the WHO recommendation that the CND must have first accepted the addition of tetrahydrocannabinol, isomers of delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention was not fulfilled, as the CND has, due to the conditionality outlined before, not voted on and thus not accepted recommendation 5.3.1. Therefore, the Commission is not to consider and will not vote on recommendation 5.3.2. Commission will therefore move on to consideration of recommendation 5.4 now. So, I would like to move forward and to the consideration of recommendation 5.4, which is to delete extracts and tinctures of cannabis from Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. WHO has labeled this recommendation or referred this recommendation as recommendation 5.4. I would like to invite Mr. Giles Fort of WHO to present the recommendation.
Is it better now?
Mr. Fort, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as the recommendation 5.4, extract and tincture, is concerned, extract and tinctures of cannabis are preparations that are produced by application of solvents to cannabis. They are currently placed in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Extract and tinctures include both medical and non-medical preparations, such as the one with high concentrations of delta-9 THC, such as butane hash oil. While the medical extract and tinctures are administered orally, those produced and used illicitly are normally inhaled following heating and vaporization. Extract and tinctures of cannabis encompasses preparations that have psychoactive properties due to delta-9 THC, as well as those that do not, like the ones considered pure CBD, pure cannabidiol. As per the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, preparations are defined as mixtures, solid or liquid, containing a substance in Schedule 1 or 2, and are generally subject to the same measure of control as that substance. The committee noted that by this definition of preparation, the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs covers all products that are extract and tinctures of cannabis as preparation of cannabis. Accordingly, in recommendation 5.4, the committee recommended deleting extract and tinctures of cannabis from Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of the WHO for introducing this recommendation, and I'll ask the members of the Commission if they are ready to move to a vote on recommendation 5.4. I now invite the Commission to take vote on the recommendation by the WHO to delete extracts and tinctures of cannabis from Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. Let me remind the Commission that under the 1961 Convention, in accordance with the Rule 58 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of ECOSOC, a simple majority of the Commission members present and voting is required for this recommendation. Secretary Joe, I would request you to please proceed with the roll call vote in accordance with the outcome of our draws this morning.
Algeria,
No.
Algeria, no. Angola,
Angola, no.
Angola, no. Australia,
Yes.
Australia, yes. Austria,
Yes.
Austria, yes. Bahrain,
No.
Bahrain, no. Belgium,
Yes.
Belgium, yes. Brazil,
Brazil, no.
Brazil, no. Burkina Faso,
Burkina Faso, no.
Burkina Faso, no. Canada,
Oui.
Canada, yes. Chile,
Sí. Yes.
yes. China,
No.
China, no. Colombia,
Colombia, sí.
Yes.
yeah, yes. Côte d'Ivoire,
Oui. No, no.
Côte d'Ivoire, no. Croatia, yes. Croatia, yes. Cuba,
Cuba, no.
Cuba, no. Czech Republic,
Yes.
Czech Republic, yes. Ecuador,
Yes.
Ecuador, yes. Egypt,
No.
Egypt, no. El Salvador,
Yes.
El Salvador, yes. France,
Oui.
France, yes. Germany,
Yes.
Germany, yes. Hungary,
No.
Hungary, no. India,
India, no.
India, no. Iraq,
Iraq, no.
Iraq, no. Italy,
Yes.
Italy, yes. Jamaica,
No.
Jamaica, no. Japan,
No.
Japan, no. Kazakhstan,
Kazakhstan, no.
Kazakhstan, no. Kenya,
Kenya, no.
Kenya, no. Kyrgyzstan,
No.
Kyrgyzstan, no. Libya,
No.
Libya, no. Mexico,
Sí.
Yes.
Mexico, yes. Morocco,
Yes.
Morocco, yes. Nepal,
Abstention.
Nepal abstention. Netherlands,
Yes.
Netherlands, yes. Nigeria,
Nigeria, no.
Nigeria, no. Pakistan,
Pakistan, no.
Pakistan, no. Peru,
Peru, no.
Peru, no. Poland, yes. Poland, yes. Russian Federation,
Russia, no.
Russian Federation, no. South Africa,
South Africa, yes.
South Africa, yes. Spain,
Sí. Yes.
yes. Sweden,
Yes.
Sweden, yes. Switzerland,
Yes.
Switzerland, yes. Thailand,
Thailand, no.
Thailand, no. Togo,
Togo, no.
Togo, no. Turkey,
Turkey, no.
Turkey, no. Turkmenistan,
Turkmenistan, no.
Turkmenistan, no. Ukraine,
Abstention.
Ukraine, abstention. United Kingdom,
Yes.
United Kingdom, yes. United States,
Yes.
United States, yes. Uruguay,
Yes.
Uruguay, yes. Afghanistan,
No.
Afghanistan, no. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just wait for a few moments before the result is compiled and we share it with you. Honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me share the result with you. There is a total of 24 votes in favor of this recommendation, 27 votes against it, and 2 abstentions. Therefore, the recommendation is rejected, and I declare that the Commission has decided not to delete extracts and tinctures of cannabis from Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. With this result, moving forward to recommendation 5.5, I would now like to invite the Commission to take action on 5.5 to add a footnote to the entry of cannabis and cannabis resin in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention to read preparations containing predominantly cannabidiol and not more than 0.2% of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol are not under international control. This recommendation has been referred to by WHO as recommendation 5.5. I would like to again invite Mr. Giles Ford of WHO to present the recommendation to the members of the Commission. Mr. Ford, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recommendation with respect to the recommendation 5.5 on cannabidiol preparations. At its 40th meeting, the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence considered a critical review of cannabidiol and recommended that preparations considered to be pure cannabidiol should not be scheduled within the International Drug Control Conventions. Cannabidiol is found in cannabis and cannabis resin, but does not have psychoactive properties and has no potential for abuse and no potential to produce dependence. Cannabidiol has been shown to be effective in the management of certain treatment-resistant childhood-onset epilepsy disorders. It has been approved for this use in the United States and the European Union. Cannabidiol can be chemically synthesized or it can be prepared from the cannabis plant. The committee noted that medicines without psychoactive effects that are produced as preparations of the cannabis plant will contain trace amounts of delta-9 THC or dronabinol. The cannabidiol preparation approved for the treatment of childhood onset epilepsy contains not more than 0.15% delta-9 THC by dry weight of plant-derived material and has no effect indicative of potential for abuse or dependence. In keeping with the 40th ECDD recommendation that preparations considered pure cannabidiol not be controlled, and recognizing that trace levels of delta-9 THC may be found in such preparations, while acknowledging that chemical analysis of delta-9 THC to an accuracy of 0.15% may be difficult for some member states, the committee recommended in recommendation 5.5 that a footnote be added to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs to read, preparations containing predominantly cannabidiol and not more than 0.2% of delta-9 THC are not under international control. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of WHO for introducing this recommendation. I now invite the Commission to take a vote on WHO recommendation to add a footnote to the entry for cannabis and cannabis resin in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention to read preparations containing predominantly cannabidiol and not more than 0.2% of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol are not under international control. Let me remind the Commission that under the 1961 Convention, in accordance with the Rule 58 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of ECOSOC, a simple majority of the Commission members present and voting is required. Secretary Joe, can you please proceed with the roll call vote?
Algeria.
No.
Algeria, no. Angola.
No.
Angola, no. Australia.
Yes.
Australia, yes. Austria.
No.
Austria, no. Bahrain.
No.
Bahrain, no. Belgium.
No.
Belgium, no. Brazil.
Brazil, no.
Brazil, no. Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso, no.
Burkina Faso, no. Canada.
Yes.
Canada, yes. Chile.
No.
Chile, no. China.
No.
China, no. Colombia.
Colombia, no.
Colombia, no. Côte d'Ivoire.
No.
Côte d'Ivoire, no. Croatia.
No.
Croatia, no. Cuba.
Cuba, no.
Cuba, no. Czech Republic.
No.
Czech Republic, no. Ecuador.
Yes.
Ecuador, yes. Egypt.
No.
Egypt, no. El Salvador.
No.
El Salvador, no. France.
No.
France, no. Germany.
No.
Germany, no. Hungary.
No.
Hungary, no. India.
No.
India, no. Iraq.
Iraq, no.
Iraq, no. Italy.
No.
Italy, no. Jamaica.
No.
Jamaica, no. Japan.
No.
Japan, no. Kazakhstan.
Kazakhstan, no.
Kazakhstan, no. Kenya.
Kenya, no.
Kenya, no. Kyrgyzstan.
No.
Kyrgyzstan, no. Libya,
No.
Libya, no. Mexico,
No.
Mexico, no. Morocco,
Abstention.
Morocco, abstention. Nepal,
Abstention.
Nepal, abstention. Netherlands,
No.
Netherlands, no. Nigeria,
Nigeria, no.
Nigeria, no. Pakistan,
Pakistan, abstention.
Pakistan, abstention. Peru,
Peru, yes.
Peru, yes. Poland,
No.
Poland, no. Russian Federation,
Russian Federation, no.
Russian Federation, no. South Africa,
South Africa, yes.
South Africa, yes. Spain,
No.
Spain, no. Sweden,
No.
Sweden, no. Switzerland,
No.
Switzerland, no. Thailand,
Yes.
Thailand, yes. Togo,
Togo, no.
Togo, no. Turkey,
Turkey, no.
Turkey, no. Turkmenistan,
Turkmenistan, no.
Turkmenistan, no. Ukraine,
Abstention.
Ukraine, abstention. United Kingdom,
No.
United Kingdom, no. United States,
No.
United States, no. Uruguay,
Uruguay, no.
Uruguay, no. And Afghanistan,
No.
Afghanistan, no. Thank you.
Honorable delegations, ladies and gentlemen, just wait for a few moments as we compile the result and share it with you. The honorable members of the commission, ladies and gentlemen, let me share the result of vote on this recommendation with you. There is a total of 6 votes in favor of recommendation, 43 votes against it, with 4 abstentions. So the recommendation is rejected. Therefore, I declare that Commission has decided not to add a footnote to the entry of cannabis and cannabis resin in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention to read preparations containing predominantly cannabidiol and not more than 0.2% of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol are not under international control. With this result, we move forward to the consideration of recommendation 5.6. And for your benefit, let me share with you that since 5.2.1 was rejected, scenario 2 for the recommendation 5.6 will be applicable here. WHO has submitted a recommendation referred to as recommendation 5.6 to add preparations containing delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, dronabinol, produced either by chemical synthesis or as preparations of cannabis that are compounded as pharmaceutical preparations with one or more other ingredients and in such a way that delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol dronabinol cannot be recovered by readily available means or in a yield which would constitute a risk to public health to Schedule 3 of the 1961 Convention. In the procedural decision adopted this morning by the Commission, the Commission decided that if recommendation 5.2.1 to add dronabinol and its stereoisomers delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention is rejected. Recommendation 5.6 to add certain preparations containing dronabinol to Schedule 3 of the 1961 Convention shall be deemed as rejected. The Commission rejected recommendation 5.2.1 earlier today. Therefore, I declare the Commission has by consensus decided not to add preparations containing delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, dronabinol, produced either by chemical synthesis or as preparations of cannabis that are compounded as pharmaceutical preparations with one or more other ingredients and in such a way that delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol dronabinol cannot be recovered by readily available means or in a yield which would constitute a risk to public health to Schedule 3 of the 1961 Convention. This brings us to completion of vote on 6 WHO recommendations which came before this reconvened session of the 63rd session of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. With this, we have now to move forward to explanation of votes. And before starting the explanation of votes, I would like to thank all the members of the 63rd CND for undertaking a vote on WHO recommendations in a smooth manner and at the same time appropriately avoiding the anomalies that could have been caused as a result of this vote. I also thank the Secretariat for conducting the vote in a very professional manner. With this, we move forward to explanation of votes segment. Dear delegates, I would like to thank you for this smooth voting process. We will now proceed with the interventions on the voting. I would like to clarify that the Commission members will be given the floor first to deliver statements referred to as explanation of votes. Then we will proceed with the joint statements and national statements by member states that are not members of the Commission. In order to do justice to all statements, they will not be summarized. Instead, they will be included in a conference room paper in full length, which will be referenced in the report. For this purpose, kindly share your statements with the Secretariat as soon as possible in Word format. I now would like to open the floor for explanations of votes by the Commission members. Please indicate your wish to take the floor by raising your nameplate or clicking on the raise hand button in interpretive. I would like to recall that in the interest of time, interventions may not be longer than 3 minutes. Longer statements can be posted on the Commission's website. As we only have limited time for interpretation available to us, which was 4 hours of interpretation today, I will unfortunately have to interrupt delegates exceeding their speaking time. Therefore, I will request if the delegates keep their interventions within the time limit. The floor is now open. I will start with giving the floor to the pre-registered interventions by the delegations. The first delegation in the list before me is Turkey. The delegation of Turkey, you have the floor.
Mr. President, thank you very much, dear colleague, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, Your Excellency, we thank you for your vice chairmanship and all your efforts throughout this sensitive and difficult process. I also express our appreciation to the UNODC Secretariat and to the INCB for all their efforts and assistance during this process. Mr. President, I reiterate that Turkey continues to be fully committed to the 3 international drug conventions, which are the cornerstones of the international drug control system. Their full and universal implementation is crucial for the effectiveness of the system, and we all bear the responsibility of securing it together. Today, the CND took a decision to change the existing level of control on cannabis and cannabis resin. For the record of this meeting, I repeat that Turkey objected to all the recommendations. We continue to believe that there is a high risk to create a wrong public impression as if cannabis and cannabis resin are not dangerous for health. Mr. President, adoption of 5.1 today by voting without consensus, just with a majority of 27 countries and against the will of 25 objecting member states and 1 abstention, created a situation which should be carefully examined and assessed by my authorities. I therefore reserve our right to communicate later on our final assessment and national position regarding this decision taken today on cannabis and cannabis resin, and whether it will be implemented by the Republic of Turkey. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Mukhtar Gun, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Turkey to the United Nations in Geneva. Ambassador, thank you for sharing Turkey's explanation of vote. The next explanation of vote in our list is China. Mr. Zhao Zhongshen, Deputy Director General, Narcotics Control Bureau of the Ministry of Public Security. Sir, you have the floor. Intervention.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, China regrets the CND's decision to reschedule cannabis and cannabis-related substances. We believe that the rescheduling of cannabis and cannabis-related substances is very complicated and specialized. In the past 2 years, the WHO and the UNODC have listened extensively to the inputs from various countries and conducted many Q&A sessions. China acknowledges this and will continue to support the CND, WHO, and the UNODC to actively perform their duties within the mandate of the Convention. On the basis of respecting the provisions of the Convention, China will continue to maintain strict control of cannabis and cannabis-related substances from the perspective of domestic laws to prevent the abuse and the harm as a result of the voting, so as not to adversely affect the public health, especially the health of the adolescents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the delegation of China for its explanation of vote. The next explanation of vote is from the delegation of United Kingdom. Kingdom, Ms. Corinne Angela Kitzel, Ambassador, Alternate Permanent Representative to the United Nations in Vienna, and the explanation of vote is in person.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking you, Ambassador Khan, for your leadership throughout this process. Thanks also to the Secretariat, the WHO Expert Committee on Drug Dependence for their work throughout, and civil society for their constructive contributions. We would have preferred to have voted on these recommendations sooner, and are pleased that the CND has today implemented its important treaty mandate role. Following today's votes, this process can be concluded. We fully support the ongoing roles of the WHO, UNODC and INCB and remain fully committed to the international drug scheduling process. The UK voted to accept recommendations 5.1, 5.2.1 and 5.4 and to reject 5.5. I wish to explain the UK's vote on two recommendations. On recommendation 5.1, we welcome the WHO's acknowledgement of the therapeutic benefits of cannabis. The UK voted in favour of 5.1 as we agree that removing cannabis from Schedule 4 is in line with the scientific evidence about its therapeutic benefits. The criteria for a drug to be placed in Schedule 4 does not apply to cannabis and cannabis resin. Evidence presented to the WHO ECDD whilst conducting their review suggests that cannabis is less harmful than other drugs within this schedule in key areas, such as posing a significant risk of death. This recommendation broadly aligns with the UK's recent domestic legislative changes to allow access to cannabis-based products for medicinal use, and a number of cannabis-based products have marketing authorization in the UK as well as in the EU and US. However, I emphasize that the UK's vote in favour of this recommendation in no way demonstrates support for the loosening of international control of cannabis. Cannabis and cannabis resin continue to present serious public health risks, and this recommendation ensures these substances remain in Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. Moving to recommendation 5.5, the UK voted to reject this as it conflicts with UK legislation. Our legislation makes clear that any product containing controlled cannabinoids, including THC, are currently controlled unless they qualify as exempt products under the Misuse of Drugs Regulations 2001. The recommendation suggests that preparations containing predominantly CBD and not more than 0.2% of Delta-9 THC should be excluded from Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. Whilst we understand the purpose behind this, the UK does not think that preparations containing not more than 0.2% THC is the appropriate level for international control, and we would like further consideration to be given to any internationally controlled level of THC in the future. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador of UK for making her intervention, her explanation of vote. The next explanation of vote is from the delegation of Hungary. Mr. Ferenc Danks, Deputy State Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and the explanation is online. Hungary, you have the floor.
Well, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hungary voted no regarding the recommendation 5.1 and 5.4 of the World Health Organization on the scheduling of cannabis and cannabis resin for the below reasons. It is indisputable fact and a sad reality that the international efforts on publishing the drug consumption have clearly failed. So this fact is especially true to the cannabis consumption, the rate of which has risen dramatically and consistently over the last decades. That's a matter of fact. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that cannabis has a strong addictive potential, which is being continuously proven by the sharp increase of cannabis use itself. there's no room for objection to these statistics. We have no doubt that if the recommendations pass, as it did, and they will result in a further high increase of consumption of cannabis. In the light of all these clear facts, the attempt to reschedule cannabis is extremely, let's say, irresponsible act in our view. In addition to this, the attempt to reschedule cannabis is nothing more than a drastic step towards drug liberalization, and at the same time, a scandalous intervention in national drug policy, which is on us. So I really like to make it clear that the use of any drugs in Hungary is illegal and punishable. We do not want to change this in the future, and we sharply reject any intervention in our national drug policy, including rescheduling cannabis. For this reason, we voted against the rescheduling of cannabis and cannabis regime. Thank you so much.
I thank the delegation of Hungary, Mr. Ferenc Danks, Deputy State Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, for your explanation of vote. The next explanation of vote is from Canada, Mr. Paul Williams, First Secretary, Permanent Mission to the United Nations, Vienna, and the explanation is in person. Mr. Paul Williams, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Narcotic drugs, pursuant to its decision 6314, effectively exercised its important normative function and responsibility to help prevent the abuse of psychoactive substances and ensure their availability for medical and scientific purposes by taking scheduling decisions based on the World Health Organization's determinative medical and scientific assessments of cannabis and cannabis-related substances. The WHO's scheduling recommendations voted on today reflect an updated and increased understanding based on the results of a first-ever scientific assessment of these substances by the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence. Following extensive consultations, including with civil society, Canada supported recommendations that recognize a modern scientific understanding of the risk of abuse and dependence. Canada accepts and agrees with the assessment of the WHO's Expert Committee that cannabis is not particularly liable to produce ill effects similar to the effects of the other substances in Schedule 4, and that there are possible therapeutic uses for cannabis. Canada thus voted for the deletion of cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4. Let us be clear. The adoption of Recommendation 5.1 does not relax or soften the control of cannabis under the UN drug conventions. Cannabis remains in Schedule 1 and continues to be subject to all measures of control applicable to drugs under the single convention. Canada will continue to take meaningful and effective action to prevent harm from cannabis use and to counter its illegal movement across international borders, which remains a serious criminal offense in our country. The CND rejected the recommendation of the WHO to add a footnote to Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention, indicating that CBD preparations containing less than 0.2% THC are not under international control. The recommendation was supported by scientific evidence in that CBD does not satisfy the criteria for international control under the drug conventions, which are concerned with the risk of abuse and dependence. With this in mind, Canada wishes to recall that during the intersessional considerations, member states registered their concern with the use of footnotes as a method to indicate that substances are not under international control. Canada suggests that the WHO's recommendation would likely meet with greater support if it were reformulated to align with the structure and purpose of the convention and schedules. The WHO and the CND should exercise caution in continuing to rely on footnotes of this sort. Canada looks forward to continuing our dialogue with member states on other pressing issues, including the proliferation of synthetic drugs and the opioid crisis, which continues both to expand geographically and to deepen in complexity. Last but not least, Canada would like to express to you, Mr. Chair, our sincere gratitude for your guidance, initiative, and leadership during these challenging times, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Mr. Paul Williams of Canada for his explanation of vote. The next explanation of vote is by Germany on behalf of the European Union. I give floor to Ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Gerhard Kunzel, who is present here in person. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the following states: Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Germany, Estonia, Finland, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden, which are all members of the European Union, as everybody knows. I'd like to explain our vote. The full text of my statement will be circulated. We supported the adoption of Recommendation 5.1 to delete cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4 of the Single Convention of Narcotic Drugs, considering that it would allow more research in line with our evidence-based drugs policy on the medical use of cannabis and cannabis resin. It should be noted, however, that these substances continue to be controlled under Schedule 1 of the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. In this regard, let me stress again that according to our understanding, the WHO recommendations do not aim and should not be seen as a step towards a liberalization of the use of cannabis or minimizing the risks and dangers it represents for our society. According to the assessment of the WHO Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, it is understood that the recommendations on delta-9 THC and its active steroisomer dronabinol, as well as on THC, do not imply any change in the international control level on these substances. Rather, they facilitate the control measures in member states. Therefore, we supported Recommendation 5.2. After 3 topical meetings this year, we have come to the conclusion that Recommendation 5.4 implies no change in the international control level of extracts and tinctures of cannabis, nor is the recommendation expected to have impacts on the control and/or reporting obligations of member states. Therefore, we now supported the deletion of extracts and tinctures of cannabis from Schedule 1 of the Single Convention. Finally, in relation to Recommendation 5.5 concerning CBD preparations, we considered that it would lower the current control level for those preparations. Moreover, the establishment of the 0.2 THC limit is not supported by scientific evidence, and the proposed wording does not exclude divergent interpretations concerning the calculation of that limit. In addition, we consider that there is no justification for the differentiated treatment of cannabidiol compared to other non-psychoactive cannabinoids. In general, we considered that the recommendation, as it has been drafted, does not offer the necessary legal certainty and does not constitute a proper solution for cannabidiol. Therefore, those of us who are also members of the Commission voted against the insertion of this footnote as this will preserve the current legal framework. However, we would welcome further consultation with all relevant stakeholders on a recommendation on the appropriate level of the international control for cannabis preparations with low THC content, while ensuring the protection of public health and welfare, taking into consideration the existing structure and the international drug control system for cannabis, as well as technical and administrative capacity needed for its implementation. And I thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of Germany for his explanation of vote on behalf of the European Union. Next explanation of vote in our list is from Switzerland. I give floor to Ms. Katharina Frey-Bossoni, Deputy Permanent Representative in the Mission on UN Affairs, and she is present here in person. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, ambassadors, excellencies, Switzerland would like to take this opportunity to thank UNODC for making this important vote possible today, despite the unprecedented pandemic, its restrictions and limitations. We also thank Chair for your guidance in finding a consensus on the process for this vote. During the last 2 years, we were able to consider the medical and scientific complexity of the WHO ECDD recommendations, as well as to address questions with regard to economic, social, legal, administrative, and other factors. The World Health Organization is the treaty body mandated to carry out medical and scientific assessments of substances, and we thank the organization and its experts for its scientific expertise. With its recommendation, WHO has given a sign of support for medical cannabis programs and acknowledges with its assessment that there is sufficient scientific evidence that cannabis can be used as an effective and safe medicine for a number of medical conditions. Switzerland voted for recommendations 5.1 to ensure that international scheduling of cannabis and cannabis resin accurately reflects the state of science, and cannabis scheduling facilitates and further stimulates research on its medical use, including potential negative consequences for patients. The scheduling process foreseen in the Convention ensures that controlled substances that are indispensable for the relief of pain and suffering are available while subjecting them to measures to prevent diversion and abuse. When it comes to recommendation 5.1, WHO, INCB, and UNODC repeatedly confirmed that there would be no impact on the measures of control applicable. According to the assessment of WHO ECDD, the recommendations on delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, dronabinol, as well as on tetrahydrocannabinol 5.2, 5.3 do not imply any change regarding the level of international control, but rather had an administrative technical background. Switzerland therefore supported these recommendations as well. The cannabis plant should be treated under the same convention as its active substance, as it is the case, for example, for the coca plant, as it cannot be distinguished whether the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol originates from the cannabis plant or if is of synthetic origin. Discrepancies and uncertainties are created if treated under different conventions. Mr. Chair, it is important that the Commission can send a strong signal to the international community that the Commission's scheduling decisions are based on evidence, take science and reality into consideration, and are capable of keeping the international drug control system up to date. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the delegate of Switzerland for her explanation of vote. The next, I have the honor to give floor to Ambassador His Excellency Mr. Antonio Marcondes do Caravello, Ambassador of and Permanent Representative of Brazil to the United Nations in Vienna, for his explanation of vote.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil is very disappointed with the decision to remove cannabis and cannabis resin from the strictest Schedule 4 of the 61 Convention. The outcome of the voting clearly shows a substantive number of members of the Commission is not convinced that there were reasons for the proposed change. However, there should be no doubt about the consequences of this decision. Cannabis plants and cannabis resin will remain included in Schedule 1 of the 61 Convention with a strict level of control. The legalization of cannabis is contrary to the conventions and is not condoned by this Commission. Chair, would like to commend you personally for leading us through the important discussion process on the impacts of the ECDD recommendations. During this process, a large number of countries expressed their serious concerns on the adverse legal, social, economic, administrative, and other implications of the recommendations. Brazil firmly believes that the international drug control system is fundamental to enable us to address the illicit production and trafficking in international controlled substances. Decisions on rescheduling of substances should be substantiated by clear benefits for the control system. International cooperation is dependent on common standards and procedures upheld by all member states in their national legislations and regulations. So, revisions cannot and should not be taken lightly. Brazil, as well as a number of other delegations, have raised serious concerns about the adoption of the proposed changes of the schedule on a number of dimensions. cannabis and related substances are at least as harmful to health as when the drug control conventions were adopted. Cannabis remains the most abused drug in the world, and cannabis products with high THC content are increasingly common. Brazil voted against all recommendations today because it's not persuaded that the potential therapeutic uses of specific cannabis-based pharmaceutical preparations, as well as scientific conducted research, are impaired by the current scheduling, which already provided sufficient flexibility to allow adequate access to these substances for medical and scientific purposes. I kindly request you, sir, to include this statement in the report of the session. I thank you once again.
Thank Ambassador Marcondes for his explanation of vote on behalf of Brazil, and yes, it will be included. The next explanation of vote, I give floor to Her Excellency Ms. Gloria Navarrete, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Chile to the United Nations in Vienna, and she is present in person. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The government of Chile has decided to vote against Recommendation 5.1 of the WHO to eliminate cannabis and cannabis resin from Annex 4 of the 1961 Convention, based on the following reasons. 1. Impact on health. National and international studies show that consumption of cannabis is a serious problem for public health, especially among young people, since there is a direct link between cannabis use and the increased likelihood of having depression, cognitive deficits, anxiety, psychotic symptoms, amongst others. In Chile, 63.9% of children and adolescents who are treated in specialized centers for drug use disorders are admitted for cannabis use. 2. High levels of consumption. In my country, 30.9% of the school population aged between 13 and 18 declared in 2017 to have used cannabis at least once during the previous year, which places us in the first place in the Americas. This percentage rises to 50.4% in high schools. Among the general population, marijuana use rose between 2010 and 2018 from 4.6 to 12.7%, an increase of 176%. 3. Recommendation 5.1 is not aligned with the main preventative public policy on alcohol and other drugs, known as Choose to Live Without Drugs, whose main objective is to reduce the use of drugs and alcohol by children and youngsters, with active participation and commitment from families, schools, communities, the public sector, and civil society. 4. Negative impact on risk perception. Chairman, insufficient scientific evidence about the medical benefits of cannabis have a direct impact on reducing the perceived risk among adolescents when using this drug. Since 2011, risk perception in Chile among youngsters has dropped from 48 to 21.9%. This dangerous symptom should send a warning to the international community. 5. Difficulties in adequate means of control. The approval of Recommendation 5.1 will hinder the application of stricter control measures under Annex 4 of the 1961 Convention, which will be detrimental to protecting the health of children and adolescents. And finally, 6. International evidence. Recreational use of marijuana by children and adolescents directly affects their memory, thoughts, concentration, movements, and coordination. Furthermore, cannabis remains the primary drug bringing people into contact with the criminal justice system, causing more than half of all drug-related crime. When it comes to students, there is a direct link between use of cannabis and poor school performance. As long as there is insufficient scientific evidence to prove the quotation marks supposed medicinal or therapeutic effects end of quotation, of cannabis, Chile will not be able to progress towards its legalization.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership and perseverance, and the Secretariat for his hard work. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Gloria for her explanation of vote on behalf of Chile. Next, I have the honor to give floor to His Excellency Mr. Mikhail Ulyanov, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Russian Federation to the United Nations in Vienna, and he is present here in person. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Russia voted against each and every one of the 6 recommendations. We're pleased that our position is shared by more than half of the member states of the CND. Unfortunately, one recommendation was nonetheless approved with a minimal majority. One vote less and the recommendation simply wouldn't have been adopted. It's unfortunate that didn't happen. Russia stands for strengthening and increasing the effectiveness of the current drugs control regime. This is based on the 3 anti-drug conventions of the UN. This fully applies to global control of cannabis. Cannabis remains the most abused narcotic across the globe. Expert discussion of the Geneva recommendations on the CND showed revisions wouldn't assist in improving the global system of control on cannabis. To the contrary, approving the recommendations would have led to a negative social, economic, and legal impact. They would have increased the burden on health ministries and health care institutions. They would have been incorrectly understood by the public as a measure of promoting legalization and decriminalization of this narcotic. Now, what was provided by WHO experts, and I don't mean by the WHO, I mean by WHO experts, that is excerpts of evidence, are not sufficient to judge the extent to which recommendations could have been useful for medical use of cannabis or to support scientific research in this field. This type of research is totally lawful and is happening in dozens of countries currently. The current regime of control on narcotics doesn't stop the development of this type of program. In this context, we fully share the view of the INCB, namely, that national programs of the use of cannabis for medical purposes must be crafted in strict compliance with the provisions of the 3 drugs conventions, so as to ensure there's no diversion of cannabis preparations to the illegal markets, nor that they are abused. WHO experts probably didn't choose the best time to be making their recommendations to the Commission. This happened against the backdrop of numerous cases of legalization of the recreational use of cannabis in different countries in breach of international law and those countries' conventions obligations. WHO experts actually clearly stated that to no extent do they endorse these type of drug liberalization experiments, yet many non-governmental organizations have seen today's vote as the first step towards legalization of cannabis. Our commission has lost 2 years and lots of financial and other types of resources so as to get to the bottom of the proposals made. We could have been using that time to study more relevant issues. We would call upon WHO experts to be more thorough and, first and foremost, more conscientious when it comes to drafting and scientifically corroborating their recommendations. The Russian Federation nationally continues to apply strict control measures for cannabis. We call upon other states in good faith to comply with their obligations as per the conventions. Dealing with the world drugs problem is only possible together, based on international law. This is a principle that Russia continues to defend. In conclusion, sir, I would like to express my gratitude to you for your skilled leadership of the CND during this difficult time as we considered the recommendation of the WHO experts. I think that we got a very good result. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Mikhail Ulyanov of Russian Federation for his explanation of vote on behalf of the Russian Federation. The next explanation of vote is from the Delegation of Colombia. I have the honor to give floor to His Excellency Mr. Miguel Camilo Ruiz Blanco, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Colombia to the United Nations in Vienna. He will be giving his explanation of vote online. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chair, after the numerous sessions that have been held at this 63rd session of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, I wish to express the gratitude of my delegation to you, Chairman, and also to the UNODC Secretariat, to the WHO and to the INCB for their invaluable contribution to the discussions that have served the basis for the voting decision of our delegation. For Colombia, the essence of the voting decision on the WHO recommendations lies in the recognition of existing scientific evidence on the therapeutic effects that some of these substances may have, while maintaining international control measures that are geared towards preventing illegal use, harmful effects, and the abuse of narcotics as part of the world drug problem. An effective approach to this problem is a priority for my country, in particular taking into account the need to uphold the fulfillment of commitments made by the international community as set forth in the relevant international conventions. Our vote in favor of recommendations 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 and 5.4 guarantees international control and access to cannabis medicine in the world, as it clarifies the definition of the different narcotic drugs included under each schedule, and thus promotes research on cannabis and its derivatives. These objectives are in keeping with the activities that have been carried out by our control authorities and the Colombian government in general through the implementation of a regulation that allows safe and informed access to the medical and scientific uses of cannabis in Colombia. With respect to recommendations 5.5 and 5.6, Colombia's negative vote is based on the absence of clear language in these recommendations, which goes against our interest in maintaining clear precedents and conceptual frameworks for the definition of the control of this type of preparations for the implementation at the national level, which would not increase the risk of creating mistakes or confusion in controlling these substances or in reporting on the use thereof. In this scenario, we deem it necessary to emphasize that in keeping with the terms of the conventions, whenever we refer to cannabis and its derivatives, we are referring to those products that are intended for medical or scientific purposes, not for recreational use. And accordingly, both the current conventional framework and the configuration of its schedules, as well as our national legal framework in Colombia, ensure that the preparation of a medical product is subject, in addition to inspection, to health and sanitary control. Thank you very much, Chair.
I thank Ambassador of Colombia for his explanation of vote on behalf of the Delegation of Colombia. The next in our explanation of vote is by Kyrgyzstan, Mr. Timur Isakov, Executive Secretary of the State Committee for Drug Control, Ministry of Internal Affairs, and it is online.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, we regret to note that the Commission has taken the decision to exclude from Schedule 4 cannabis. At this time, there are more than tens of thousands of hectares of cannabis in the Kyrgyz Republic that are then used to produce marijuana and hashish. There are about 15 tons of cannabis seized each year. This means that this is a dangerous phenomenon for 6.5 million people. More than 80% of drug-dependent persons in the Kyrgyz Republic use cannabis products. Each year, there's a growing number of treated cases. This is a heavy burden on the state budget covering these expenditures. Cannabis products emanating from Afghanistan and smuggled into Kyrgyzstan exacerbate an already difficult situation. In this regard, the state budget allocates significant funds to ensuring the action of a subunit to combat narcotics drugs, including law enforcement bodies, border control services, prosecutors' offices, and others. We think that any action aimed at weakening cannabis control and its derivatives could have a negative impact on the drug situation in our country. Thus, we inform you that so as to deal with the negative consequences of this decision taken today, we are considering the application of Article 39 of the Single Convention of 1961 and Article 23 of the 1971 Convention, which provides the right for countries to apply more strict control measures than those stipulated by these conventions. Thank you.
I thank the delegation of Kyrgyzstan for their explanation of vote. The next is explanation of vote is by United States of America. I give floor to Mr. Ethan Glick, Counselor Permanent Mission to the United Nations in Vienna of the United States, who is present in the room in person. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, for your exceptionally skilled leadership that has brought us to the conclusion of this important process. In recent years, well-controlled clinical trials have identified therapeutic uses for certain isolated cannabinoids, most notably the product Epidiolex, which contains highly purified cannabidiol extracted from the cannabis plant and which was approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in 2018 for the treatment of 2 rare seizure disorders in children. As a result, cannabis no longer meets the criterion for placement in Schedule 4 of the Single Convention. Nevertheless, cannabis and cannabinoids are clearly not benign substances. There is robust scientific evidence of negative and lasting health effects, especially to pregnant women and adolescents. Cannabis use can result in addiction, and its use appears to also increase the subsequent risk of addiction to other drugs. The cannabis plant has not been approved as a safe and effective therapeutic for any indication. The WHO ECDD's scientific assessment highlighted these public health risks, reaffirming the original decision the drafters of the Single Convention made to subject cannabis to the strictest level of international controls. The United States voted yes on recommendation 5.1, consistent with the science demonstrating that while a safe and effective cannabis-derived therapeutic has been developed, cannabis itself continues to pose significant risk to public health and should continue to be controlled under the International Drug Control Conventions. Further, this action has the potential to stimulate global research into the therapeutic potential and public health effects of cannabis and to attract additional investigators to the field, including those who may have been deterred by the Schedule 4 status. Additionally, the United States was unable to support vote in support of recommendation 5.5 on legal and procedural grounds. We do not dispute the scientific basis for the recommendation. Cannabidiol has not demonstrated abuse potential, and it is not our position that cannabidiol should be or is under the control of the international drug conventions. As a matter of past practice, when the ECDD recommends that a substance not be internationally controlled, no CND action is required to give effect to that recommendation. Substances are presumed to be outside the scope of the conventions unless explicitly included in a schedule. This recommendation to give effect to a state of affairs which already exists therefore breaks from past procedure and intrudes on the treaty-based mandate of the CND to make recommendations for the implementation of the aims and provisions of the drug control conventions. The treaties give significant flexibility to allow member states to design drug control policies that reflect their national realities. We believe member states can determine themselves what should be considered a pure cannabidiol preparation for domestic enforcement purposes based on analytic capability, abuse liability, and prioritization of prosecutorial resources. Indeed, many countries, including the United States, have already instituted legal measures to adopt thresholds for purity and residual delta-9 THC impurities in CBD preparations. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Ethan Glick, Counselor from the U.S. Mission here for explanation of vote on behalf of the United States of America. The next explanation of vote is by Mexico, Mr. Diego Semenca's First Secretary in person here. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I shall read a brief version of the statement. The full version of the statement has been submitted already to the Secretariat. Chair, on behalf of the Mexican government, I would like to thank you, the Secretariat, and all delegations for your active and constructive participation, which has made it possible, in spite of the difficulties triggered by the global pandemic COVID-19, allowing us to fulfill one of the main tasks of the Commission today, namely to take action on the proposed amendments to the scope of international control of scheduled substances, in this particular case of cannabis and its derivatives. The WHO, through its Expert Committee on Drug Dependence and in keeping with the 1961 and 1971 treaties, carried out a critical analysis with scientific and medical basis regarding the uses and therapeutic possibilities related to cannabis and its derivatives, underlining the need to continue further studying and deepening investigation and research into this area. When the current international drug control system was established, the international community should have foreseen that the global drug situation would not remain static, that it would change, and that understanding of new substances would rise and change over time. Given these new realities, and therefore Mexico calls upon the Commission to periodically review the validity of current schedules. Chair. During the thematic consultations, my country carried out an analysis of the technical merits of each of the recommendations, seeking to reconcile positions to reach coherent decisions, both in terms of the drug control conventions, as well as in light of recent developments and progress. With the vote expressed today, Mexico echoes the continued appeal to develop an international drug control policy that is more balanced, more comprehensive, and which promotes the health and well-being of individuals and their rights above and beyond substances. For the Mexican government, the action taken today is not the end of a process, rather it opens a new chapter for the critical, substantive, and sound evidence-based deliberations not based on prejudice here within the Commission and in the treaty-mandated bodies of the United Nations under the International Drug Control Treaties. The Commission and its control bodies should focus their attention on those substances that truly pose a threat to human health, life, and well-being. We trust that in the future, certainly there will be greater readiness to update that which is no longer in keeping with global reality, changing what has not led to positive results, and discard the outdated and inert aspects. The votes in favor made by Mexico related to recommendations 5.1 and 5.4, as well as our votes against recommendations 5.2, 5.3, 5.5, and 5.6 are based on the following elements, including trust in multilateralism and the role of the United Nations, observance of international law, of international human rights law, and the development of national norms as living and not static sources. Taking into account evidence related to the use of cannabis and derivatives for medical purposes, while recognizing the psychoactive potential that they might have, equally the potential to abuse and dependence, avoiding double control of substances and avoiding duplication under schedules, ensuring that no additions are made to international schedules of substances that would not be subject to international control. And then finally, Mexico wishes to acknowledge the work and contributions provided by governmental experts, by academia, by representatives of civil society, the private sector, and by other international organizations throughout the process. And all of these sectors should continue to be heard and their voices heard within our Commission. I would like to conclude by commending you, Chair, for your guidance at this session. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Diego Semencas for his explanation of vote on behalf of Mexico. The next explanation of vote is by France. Mr. Raphael Trapp, Deputy Permanent Representative in person. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. France fully aligns itself with the statement delivered by Germany on behalf of the European Union. Chair, we would like to thank you and the Secretariat for organizing the thematic intersessionals on cannabis classification. These enabled all members of the Commission to better understand the national implications of the WHO recommendations related to health, security and social matters. These debates, fueled by the most stringent scientific expertise, allowed us to take an informed and fully objective decision. We commend the adoption of Recommendation 5.1. Indeed, we firmly believe that the best way to protect the international drug control system, and we reiterate our commitment to this, is to allow it to adapt to ongoing changes and transformations that we would be remiss to ignore, in particular as regards the therapeutic potential of cannabis. Equally, we must continue to uphold staunchly the fundamental principles. No concession should be made here, namely related to the health and security of our peoples. In this regard, the legalization of cannabis must remain a red line. It runs counter to international treaties. In the same vein, we shall continue to sound the alarm related to the dangers posed by the use of cannabis and other drugs. We must resist the temptation to politicize these recommendations, as the stakes are indeed high. Here we must uphold the credibility and the relevance of the international drug control system in view of a constantly changing world, where unfortunately the critical drug situation remains unchanged. To that end, the system must continue to prove its efficacy by upholding the health and safety of our peoples when it comes to dangers related to drugs. It must continue to assist us in developing a balanced approach towards drugs, which is based on tireless struggle against trafficking in drugs, preventing use and providing care for users in full respect for human rights. It is only thus that we shall be able to continue to act collectively and efficiently to tackle the drugs problem. Finally, my delegation would like to thank you, Chair, for your guidance of our Commission's work. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Raphael Trapp for giving us explanation of vote of France on these recommendations. Now, the next explanation of vote is by Pakistan delegation. I have the honor to give floor to His Excellency Mr. Aftab Ahmed Khokar, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations in Vienna, and he will be making his explanation of vote online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a privilege to see you in the chair. Pakistan voted against recommendation 5.5, and as you have noted that out of 8 recommendations, 7 have been voted against. So it's a matter of concern for us that this recommendation 5.1, on which we had stated our views, has been adopted. We accept the decision, but we remain concerned that any change in the current scheduling will lead to weakening of international controls, as it will cause gaps and uncertainties in the implementation of control measures. The adoption of recommendation 5.5 could eventually compromise integrity of the international drug control regime. Therefore, we call on the Commission, its members, and international community to ensure strict monitoring of any misuse and abuse of cannabis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank His Excellency Aftab Ahmed Khokar, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations in Vienna, for explanation of vote on behalf of Pakistan. The next explanation of vote is by the Libyan delegation, His Excellency Mr. Jalal E.A. Alashi, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Libya to the United Nations in Vienna, and Ambassador is present in the hall in person. Ambassador, you have the floor.
بداية أود أن أتقدم لكم سيد الرئيس بالشكر على حكمة
First of all, Chairman, allow me to thank you for your efforts, for your skillfulness in guiding us through the current session. As we acknowledge the efforts that have been made and which continue to be made by UNODC, by the INCB, and by the CND and by the WHO in order to tackle the problem of drugs, which has harmful consequences for global health and security. And given that my country has always supported international bodies in seeking to address the drugs phenomenon, in full respect of international drug conventions, we voted no against all of these recommendations because the drugs problem is closely linked to crime, and crime in all its manifestations, which has a negative impact on the socio-economic situation as well as the security situation. Moreover, it runs counter to national legislation. There are states currently going through exceptional circumstances who do not have national stability, seeking to address many difficulties in an attempt to control and implement these recommendations properly, and to implement the inclusion the scheduling of substances. So this is a very difficult undertaking indeed, and we have noted that there was no consensus here within the Commission. To conclude, we wish you the best of success, as well as all success to competent authorities in order to successfully combat drugs, to help bring about a world free from drugs. Thank you.
Australia is last.
I thank Ambassador Alashi of Libya for explanation of vote of his delegation and on behalf of Libya. Now we are coming to the close of the session, and we have the last speaker, which is Australia, for their explanation of vote. I give floor to Ms. Emily Bugin, Second Secretary, Permanent Mission to the United Nations in Vienna of Australia. She is present here in person. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the Australian delegation, we express our sincere thanks to you, Ambassador Khan, for your able leadership, and to the Secretariat for your tireless efforts to arrange today's vote in the ongoing challenging circumstances. Australia is committed to protecting and strengthening the international rules-based order. The International Drug Control Framework and scheduling system is a critical part of the rules-based order, and the recommendations we voted on today are part of our broader collective effort to address the world drug problem. The treaty-mandated role of the WHO's Expert Committee on Drug Dependence is important. Conducting medical and scientific reviews of substances help us to make informed scheduling decisions and help maintain the currency of and ongoing public support for the International Drug Control Framework. So it is important that the CND does its job in making decisions in a timely manner. After having discussed these recommendations at length, it is good that we have voted today. We would like to be clear and explicit upfront. Australia does not support the legalisation of cannabis for recreational use, and that is not what this vote is about. We recognise the substantial risk that cannabis use carries. We also recognise the potential therapeutic benefits of cannabis. This assessment is based on medical and scientific evidence, which is evident from the review conducted by the WHO. On this basis, Australia supported Recommendation 5.1, which recognises that cannabis and cannabis resin are unlikely to produce ill effects similar to other Schedule 4 substances, and that some parties have enacted laws to enable the medical use of cannabis and cannabis resin. Australia considers this approach strikes an appropriate regulatory balance and simply recognises that there is a legitimate medical use quite separate to the use of cannabis for research purposes. Australia supported Recommendation 5.2 and 5.3. Australia's strong preference is for dronabinol, THC and its stereoisomers to be managed consistently with cannabis and cannabis resin under Schedule 1 of the 1961 Convention. This would remove ambiguity and complexity, especially as it applies to trade between member states. Australia supported Recommendation 5.4, which will improve consistency and remove ambiguity in the regulation of cannabis extracts and preparations. Australia supported recommendation 5.5 on the basis that predominantly cannabidiol preparations with low concentrations delta-9 THC are of less risk of harm than those which contain greater than 0.2%. This recommendation assists in improving consistency and trade and reporting discrepancies. In closing, Chair, Australia takes seriously its responsibility as a member of the CND. We strongly support a scientific and evidence-based approach to scheduling substances under the International Drug Control Framework, and we acknowledge and thank civil society and academia for their important contributions to the consideration of these recommendations. Thank you.
I thank Australia for their explanation of vote. We have already overshot in terms of time in the morning session, and therefore we have to suspend the morning session, and we will be reconvening at 3 o'clock in the afternoon session according to Vienna time. Other delegations may adjust accordingly. So far, 18 members of the Commission have made their explanations of vote. Another 14 have already requested, and I see many ambassadors and heads of delegations are present in the room who have yet to make their explanations of vote. We will assume or resume our proceedings at 3 o'clock this afternoon and continue with our list. The first speaker in the afternoon session will be Ambassador of Thailand. So with your indulgence, I would like to now suspend the meeting. And we see you in the afternoon session. Thank you very much.